Today is the 11th of Tishrei. We are continuing in chapter 136 discussing the laws and rules of the Daled Minim, the four species that we wave and hold on Sukkot. Today we'll be doing paragraph 3 through the end of the chapter, which is paragraph 10. Paragraph 3. We're continuing the laws of the myrtle branch, the Hadass. The minimum size for the Hadass is 3 handbreadths, which is approximately 10.6 inches. We saw in paragraph 2 how it's supposed to be triple leaved. Every level is supposed to have 3 leaves coming out of it. Says the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch that if you don't have that, as long as the majority of the stem has these 3 leaves, this triple braided, then it's still considered a valid Hadass and could be used. And it's not really even the majority of the stem, it's the majority of the 3 handbreadths of the 3 tfachim, which is the minimum requirement for it to be kosher Hadass. Paragraph 4. You have to make sure that the top of the Hadass is not snipped off. That would invalidate the Hadass from being used as one of the 4 species. Sometimes, however, you'll see one Hadass branch will have another Hadass branch shooting off of it from the side. Those Hadass branches should be snipped off. If those are not snipped off, then that would invalidate the Hadass from being used. As always, in case of any doubt, check with the halachic authority. Paragraph 5. The next species that we take is the willow branch, in Hebrew, the arava. Now in the Talmud, in the Torah, it talks about the willow branch growing by the stream and also having a red stem. It doesn't need to be by the stream or have a red stem, but generally it does. That's why it's talked about like that. Even without it growing by the stream, without a red stem, if the stem is green, it still is a valid arava. It still could be used. One thing to make sure, however, is that the edges of the leaf is not serrated. It's a smooth edge. A serrated edged leaf would mean that this branch is from a slightly different species of willows, not from the ones that we need for the 4 species. Paragraph 5. The following things could invalidate the willow branch. It has to be moist. It can't be dried out. Just like by the Hadass and also by the lulav. We didn't mention by the lulav, but just like by the Hadass and the lulav, you have to make sure that the top is not snipped off. Also, you have to make sure that it has the majority of its leaves still on the branch. If some leaves fall off, that's fine. Of course, best to have all the leaves on, but if some leaves fall off, it's fine, as long as the majority of the leaves are still on the branch. Unlike the Hadass, we're very careful that all the leaves has these sets of 3 leaves growing out from the same level along the stem. With the arava, with the willow branch, that's not necessary. Paragraph 7. Just like we saw by Sukkah, one cannot use a lulav, esrog, Hadass, or arava that is stolen, and therefore you have to make sure that it's really yours. If you're getting it from if you don't go to somebody who's a thief to buy it, but if you're going to chop it, you're going to harvest it yourself, snip it off yourself from the ground, then make sure that the owner really owns the property, the person that you're buying it from. And even if you're pretty certain, but there's a slight doubt, have him snip it and then sell it to you, instead of you snipping it yourself. Paragraph 8. How do you bind all these different species together? So you hold the lulav straight up. You have to make sure that it's standing up, it's not upside down, it has to be in the way that it grows. So the final leaves are on top. And the spine should be facing you. On the right side of the lulav of the palm branch, you attach the 3 hadassim, the 3 myrtle branches. On the left side, you attach the 2 willow branches, the aravos. The lulav itself should have 3 ties around it. Generally nowadays we'll use leftover lulav leaves, palm leaves, to make ties to tie around the lulav. So you should have 3 ties holding the lulav closed. And then you take another one and you tie it around the lulav, the myrtle, and the willow branches. Also nowadays it's very common to get these holders made out of lulav branches, lulav leaves, that are used to hold the lulav, the hadassim, and the aravos. You have to make sure that the lulav is taller, extends above the aravos and the hadassim, and the hadass and the myrtle branch should be at the same level of the willow branches, but really also a little drop taller than the willow branches. The lulav, however, the palm branch has to be a good hand's breadth above the willow and the myrtle branches. On Yom Tif, on the holiday itself, not the intermediary days of Chol Hamoed, but the first 2 days of Sukkot, we're not allowed to tie knots. So if you didn't have chance, so really it's best to make sure to tie it all together, the lulav, the hadasim, and the ravos, before the holiday begins. If you did and it became undone, or if you didn't have time to before, then you shouldn't tie a knot. You should either tie it with a bow, or you should wrap it around and then just tuck in the end of the string or the end of the lulav leaf. Just tuck it in instead of tying any sort of knot. Paragraph 9. The Kitzur Shulchan Aruch says this next rule about willow branch, but I think it should apply to any of the 4 species. If they're chopped off, if they're picked or snipped off the ground from their trees on Yom Tif, on the holiday itself, one of the first 2 days of Sukkot, then you cannot use it that day. But if it was picked on the first day, it could be used on the second day. However, if the first day was Shabbos and was picked on the first day of Shabbos, it then cannot be used on the second day either. You would not be able to use it until Chol Hamoed, the intermediary days of Sukkot. One of the rules on Yom Tif and on Shabbos is that we're not allowed to travel more than 2,000 cubits outside the city, and anything which started outside 2,000 cubits outside the city, if it comes into the city, then it has a lot of rules about how you could use it. So let's say a shipment of esrogs arrive on Shabbos from outside that area. It's called the Tchum, further 2,000 cubits past the edge of the city. So a shipment of esrogs, lulavs come in on Yom Tif on the holiday. Could use it on the holiday. It came from outside the Tchum. So if there's an Erev enclosure around your city, then it could be used. And you could bring it anywhere within the city. If there's no Erev, if the city is not enclosed, then you're still allowed to use this esrog lulav that came on the holiday, came on Yom Tif. However, you can't bring it anywhere. It has to stay at the place where it got dropped off at. We're going to learn more of these rules of things that come out of the city when we get to the laws about Shabbos many months down the road. Paragraph 10. If somebody they bought themselves a set of the 4 species, but it's not the nicest set, then when you're making the bracha in the morning, it's better to use your friend's set that is nicer. However, don't say that, okay, I'm off the hook, I don't have to buy my own set because my friend has a nicer set, because it's still good to have your own set to use during Hallel. We'll see in the next chapter how that we shake the lulav and the esrog during Hallel, so it's important to have your own set to use during Hallel. One thing to note is that the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, for some reason, does not go through the laws of the esrog of the citron. We talked about the lulav, the hadas, the myrtle, the aravos, which are the willows. He doesn't go through the laws of what could invalidate an esrog, and an esrog, the citron, is really the most delicate of all 4. So I can go through a few of those laws briefly, but I think the reason why the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch doesn't go through it, is because it does get technical, it requires training, and therefore it's always best to have a rabbi available that you can bring it to have him look it over. The main things you have to be concerned about with an esrog, with a citron, is if you're holding an esrog, there's this part which is the stem, that was the part that was attached to the tree. The other side of the esrog will sometimes have a little crown on it, that we call in Hebrew a pittum. Sometimes that pittum falls off while the esrog is growing. If so, not a problem. However, if the esrog was picked and it had a pittum on it, or it wasn't picked, it was about to be picked and it had a pittum on it, and the pittum broke off after it was picked, or shortly before it was picked, that would invalidate the esrog from being used, at least on the first day. The second day would be kosher. If the esrog has some black spots, they could invalidate the esrog. If the esrog got a little cut or is missing something, that could invalidate it. So laws do get a bit technical, so just if you have any questions about your esrog, always worthwhile to have somebody who is familiar with the laws of esrogs to look it over. This concludes today's learning. Have a wonderful day and see you tomorrow.